Create Today podcast. This show is all about how you can create the life you want one day at a time. I'm your host, Karen Stanley, and my guest today is John Wagner. He is the CEO and founder of Limitless Financial Group, and he's a father and a husband and a patriot. Welcome, John. Thank you so much for being here.
It is a pleasure to be on that call. I was sitting there as people list the titles, right? I'm always wondering, is something else gonna sneak into the headline? Am I gonna get, domestic terrorists? Am I going to get on that FBI list? I don't know when that's going to come up, but I'm sure it's going to be soon. But I'll stop with the ones that you listed.
You just never know. Well, you haven't been canceled yet, so I don't think that you can be a domestic terrorist yet. You need to work harder.
I'll put in the effort.
I love it. So right before we started recording, we were talking about what is your quote unquote title. Speaking of titles.
Sure.
You're CEO and founder of Limitless Financial Group. So tell us about that.
As far as title or as far as the group?
Both.
Okay. Well, I think there's a lot of people who throw a title on them that they actually did not earn. So there's a misconception between what a financial advisor is, insurance, whatever the case may be. And there's all kinds of abbreviations that you can throw on the end of everyone's name. And truth be told, the only ones really need to be BS because they're all kind of bullshit.
True.
I think what we need in this society, and the reason why Limitless Financial Group was founded, came from a lack of knowledge that's being given to the population regarding what money truly is. And so I may be the CEO and founder of it, but it doesn't say Wagner Financial Group. It's Limitless Financial Group because it's much bigger than just simply one person trying to make a dent with a group or with a financial office. This may be deeper than you want to go on this as far as the title aspect of things, but I think we as a society have been led down a financial path that's nothing more than a hamster wheel that people can't get out of. The likes of the talking heads that are in our society telling us what to do with our money, it doesn't seem to be working for the last 5 generations, truthfully. So if you look at the last 250, 300 years, no one's really accomplished a great deal of wealth except for a very elite few.
True.
The reason why I kind of go away from the title of financial advisor or anything in that realm is because it's all common sense if you just do the research to read the books, understand the literature behind it. There's biblical premises to it. There is stuff your grandparents have taught you about it. And the mission behind Limitless Financial Group is we're hoping that within 30, 40, 50 years, there's no such thing as a financial advisor that needs to exist moving forward. And I'm hated in the industry because of that. Because a lot of people make an awful lot of money by giving advice that's really not, it's really not biblically based. It's not going to put you in the right frame of mind moving forward. And it benefits a larger conglomerate than it actually does the person that they're trying to serve. And
it keeps the advisors in their jobs for life.
It's not, well, the advisors in their job for life, that's true. But it's also, do you ever see the company going away?
Mm-mm.
I'm trying not to say the names of certain groups, but the Vanguards, the BlackRocks, they own everything in the world.
Yep.
Okay. So if you trickle this further down, right? So if you take the elites of the world owning everything, and then next thing you know, you have people who work for those companies, and they say they don't. They say they don't work for the company. But the second you have any kind of income coming in, you work for a company. And if you're advising people on where their income is going, you therefore are telling them the knowledge and the indoctrination that you've had, whether it be in college or whether it be in seminars or programs or whatever the case may be that you've sat through, the training seminars, right? It's the same bullshit that's being taught to you that has been taught for the last 100 years. Mm-hmm. So you sit there and say you're a financial advisor, but all you are is a regurgitator of knowledge. And what you're regurgitating is everything that you've learned from the people who are telling you what to learn. It's the same thing we dealt with in 2020 with nurses and doctors sitting there saying, I'm the one who knows best. No, you don't. You're just telling us what they're telling you, and they're telling you what they've told you, and it goes up the food chain.
Mm-hmm.
But we as a society, and we as consumers and investors of our money, right?
Yep.
Trying to make our money grow. And we're reaching out to these financial advisors. And truth be told, most of them are broke anyways, because they're following the same mantra that everyone else is. So what I've established here is to break the paradox. And that's been hard for me, even as a person who has a wife, a family, and trying to break that paradox, is that you're constantly met with this opposition of like, well, that's not the way we should do it. That's not the right way to do it. And then finally you have to sit there and say, okay, we have to go completely and totally against the grain.
Right.
And if you don't go against the grain, you're going to be right in the matrix again.
Right. It's cognitive dissonance, because that's what we've taught, right?
If you go against the matrix, and you sit there and say, okay, I'm going to save, I'm going to allocate, I'm going to make my money work for me. And if I do this and I teach this and I bring this up to the people who I'm around and I educate them, I'm not a financial analyst. I'm not a financial advisor. I'm nothing like this. I'm just simply a common sense individual that happens to work in this field. The term I like a lot is wealth manager. Right? However, people will sit there and say, oh, wealth manager, the first thing they think of is a financial advisor or someone who's works on the stock market. I'm like, that's actually ill-informed.
Mhm.
Well, whatever you have and how you manage it. So I may be talking to someone who's 18 years old that has $200 in his pocket. It's like, okay, how do you manage it? I may be talking to someone who makes $200 million a year. And the question then is, well, how do you manage it? Okay. So I've had clients sit there and say to me, like, hey, you approach me in a way where I feel like I'm the richest person in the world. I'm like, because you are. Because what you have, you've made work for you. And that's, in my opinion, how you can educate the population to sit there and say, this is how you take back control.
Right. You just said it. That's really what it is. Taking back control of your own situation, your own wealth, whatever it is.
Right.
And then making it grow.
Well, we're taught to take care, we're taught to put our money into their solutions instead of our solutions.
Will you talk really quickly? When we do that, all of us have been indoctrinated to do that, and give us a couple examples, like put what 10% of your money in 401k as an example. We are taught to do that. Tell us what the repercussions of that are. Tell us what really happens when we do the things that have been taught to us for the last 100 years.
Okay, how are they working so far?
Yeah.
That's the first thing I do to anyone who comes into my office or has a conversation with me. So most of my clientele are business owners. So the first thing I'm going to say to a business owner is, what's your best rate of return? What's your number one investment? And the first thing they're going to say to me is what?
I have no idea.
Themselves. If
Okay.
you're a business owner, your number one rate of return and your best investment you ever made was actually betting on you. So then I'll sit there and say, so why in God's green earth are you going to take the money that you can put back into you and reinvest into your company and reinvest into yourself and put it into another company that's either gone woke or has been part of this bullshit that we've been dealing with for the last 100 years? And why would you put your money into that conglomerate when you know truly where your moral compass is, what your core values are, what your mission statement is, and you know exactly who the CEO, and if anything goes wrong in your company, you know exactly who to bitch and complain to.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll explain it to them that way, where I just said that in what, a minute? And I saw your eyes brighten because it makes perfect sense. But a financial advisor is not going to teach you that, because they don't get a commission split and they don't get assets under management for you to be able to put your money back into your company.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant. I love it.
That's exactly what this country needs. Is we need advisors to sit there and tell the business owner, who are actually the ones that actually need to understand their finances the most.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're going to employ people, they're going to actually bring the blue collar jobs back to the society, and they're going to be the ones that actually trickle down in the proper way to sit there and say, hey, you know what, I'm the employer, I have 2,000 employees, but I'm actually going to educate all my employees the right way. So you brought up the 401k. 401k was invented in 1974. It's barely older than I am. And I say to people all the time, like, do you know that? Like, we just buy into the fact that, you know, ERISA was enacted, and because of ERISA being enacted, everyone sat there and said, well, 401k has been around for a long time. Check mark. Thank you, Susie, in the HR department. Now let me sit there and take advice from you. You went to school for political science. Now you have an HR degree. And I'm going to sit there and check the box because 3% match makes sense to me. Where a day before that, we had this thing called a pension, where your grandpa worked forever in a certain company. The day he decided to retire, they got him a gold watch and they said, you're good. Live off into the sunset. You worked your ass off. Now we sit there and say, hey, put 3% away in a savings account in a 401k that you cannot touch, you do not have access to. And when you retire, right, we sit there and said, the financial advisor is really freaking smart, because he sits there and tells you, hey, by the way, you have all this money in there, but my business is based off of the fact that you don't suck it all dry. So because of that, take 4%. That sounds good to you, right? Take 4% of your net, and hopefully you don't die before it's gone. And the way in which it works is that don't die before it's gone. Sorry, I'm just on a tangent. I got to get it out. It works, Karen, because there's no legacy left behind. There's no impact to the next generation, because you do this curve of earn. All right, you're going to retire now. Okay, let's make sure we milk it all down so that when you leave, there's nothing besides a burial plot that you can leave behind.
I had no idea 401k was invented in 74. I had no idea.
The guy who invented the 401k said he made a monster and he regrets it.
He did? Wow. That's sad. Oh man. You mentioned your mission, and you talk about how your mission is different than your why. A lot of people are talking about finding my why. I need my why. Why am I doing this? I need my quote motivation. Talk about the difference between those two, and what do you mean by that?
So the difference between a mission and a why is a lot of people confuse the why statement with their mission, or they confuse the why statement with their purpose, or their duties, their responsibilities.
Yeah. What do you think are the differences, and why do people confuse it?
Because I think it's a cultural thing. You know, my wife said it best. So we're surrounded by entrepreneurs. Okay. And we're surrounded by, you're in the coaching field. So there are an awful lot of people that will spend all this time going to seminars, going to trainings, and going to coaches, and they'll sit there and say, hey, I saw Tony Robbins, or I saw this guy, that guy, I saw all these guys talk. And then you ask the question, well, like, that's awesome. When are you going to put that into practice? Oh, as soon as I go to this next seminar. So they're constantly chasing another person's validation on what they know inside they should already be doing. And we look for people and we sit there and say, hey, I'm an entrepreneur, as this whole glorified thing. Andy Frisella talks about it and says it best. The percentage of people that are actually entrepreneurs in this world are like, what, 7%? And the amount of successful ones are like 1%. There are men, this might be a good segue for you, but there are men in this world who sit there and say that my family's my why. No, it is not. It is your responsibility, and it is your duty. If you got up every morning and you sat there and said, my purpose in life is my family, go right back to bed. They're dead. Sorry, let me rephrase that. Right back to bed, because they have not died. Okay. So if you follow what I'm saying here, if your family is your why and you wake up and they haven't died, right? Sweet, you're done.
Don't have to do a thing.
Right. Did the cavemen way back in the day, or did my grandfather who worked his ass off, or your grandfather, whatever the case may be, right? These people who are entrepreneurs who like went out and to strive. You think they woke up in the morning like, wow, I don't know if this aligns with my why today. Do you think they did that? Or do you think they just freaking worked?
They wanted to eat, so they went to work.
So here's the thing, their family, right, that they had to come home to at 6, 8 o'clock at night, right? That they didn't see their kids really, right? Because mommy was home, raised. So sorry for anyone who's going to be offended by this, but the mother was home raising the children. The father worked his ass off.
Yep.
Why? Because it was his duty, it was his responsibility to do so. It was his biblical principled responsibility. So
100%.
So these guys who are sitting there saying, "Oh, my family is my why," I'm like, "You're a sucker. Your family's your duty, your responsibility. Now add something."
There you go.
That gets into mission, and that gets into purpose. When my mother passed away 7 years ago, right? And my mother didn't work much in her life. She was a seamstress. She made cakes that were fantastic, but she stayed home and she raised 5 children. Now, you could sit there and say that, my mother, her family was her why. But did she have a purpose and a mission? Sure. She was a sweetheart of a woman. She served in the church. She served her community. She was a person where when there was the line to get into the funeral, it was over an hour and a half long.
Wow.
But that's a person who lived her life with some kind of creed inside, some kind of purpose, some kind of mission. Now, we're striving in this environment of entrepreneurs and business owners, and not for nothing, all these fake gurus out in this world telling people that they need to strive for a why, a purpose, and all this other stuff. What made me change it to a mission statement is that I truly believe that when you die, you're going to meet your maker, whether you believe in him or not. You're going to meet a maker. You can't look around here and sit there and say this all just happened. Boom. It did. He did it. He's the one who did the boom. But I believe that I'm going to meet my maker, and I think all of us are going to meet the maker. I think it's really sad for us to look at our life and not put such grandiose expectations out there that we must accomplish. It's already destined that we will have people come into our life like our family and our children, but their life is not our why, because they have their own decisions to make.
Mm-hmm.
So if we attach ourselves to only our family as our why, our purpose, and all this other stuff, what happens when they make a wrong decision? What happens when your child goes off to college and decides to do other things and become their own? Like, you're attaching yourself to someone else that's going to make their own choices in life. And they should have the freedom where you can allow them to go. Whether that be your partner, your wife, your spouse, whatever the case may be. Saying that they're your why holds them to you. That's mine. That's my why. Nope, it's your duty to allow them to have the freedom where they can grow too. On the mission side of things, I think we live in a culture where we give up far too quickly on attaining things that are way out there. Way out there. And I hope that's giving you the answer, because I want to go a little further if you give me a minute.
Mm-hmm.
My ancestors came over from Ireland to America.
Mm-hmm.
All four of them, all four of my grandparents on my mother's side landed in the same town in Massachusetts. They all worked their tail off. And they were striving for what? A new life, freedom, opportunity, all these things. They did not settle. There is something inside of us that pulls us for more. And what we're seeing in this culture is a comfort, the comfort that we all want in this society, right? Whether it be a nice comfy house, air conditioning, and gated community, like whatever the case may be. It's this warm blanket of comfort that I think robs us truly of understanding what it's like to be uncomfortable, and then realizing we can actually accomplish a lot when we're uncomfortable. And when we're uncomfortable, we kind of hone in on our ancestral traits that sit there and say, hey, I can survive this. And if I can survive this, what else can I actually survive? And then I can put up a goal like, hey, I don't want there to be any financial advisors in 50 years. I want people to understand that the financial reserve is neither financial or a reserve. I want my mission to be so large that if I fall flat on my face, hell, if my goal is way up there and I promise I'm going to reach that goal, I can guarantee you my family's going to be taken care of. But I also know when I go up to the pearly gates of heaven and I met with my maker, and if it's biblically aligned, he's going to sit there and say to me, well done. That's a mission.
I love that. I want to go back and talk about comfort and this ever increasing desire to run away from uncomfortable things and how that is literally killing us. We're running away from uncomfortable things so much so that we don't gain strength. We don't gain any practice from what you're talking about. You're talking about the uncomfortable things that and I would venture to say that everybody's grandparents listening to this show have very similar situations. Most of us are grandchildren or great-grandchildren of immigrants. Most of our grandchildren made all of their own food, had cows, had farms, they worked their asses off, or they didn't eat. My grandfather homesteaded a little place in New Mexico, and they farmed potatoes for 6 months and ate potatoes for 6 months during the winter. That's it. That's all they had. And so we'll never know what that's like. Well, we might coming up. But we don't have that experience. We don't have that. We have everything available to us with a click of the button. And 5 seconds later, it arrives at our door, right? So I want to talk about comfort and why it's so important, but being uncomfortable is so important. Why are we shying away from it so much, this generation, making us so weak and so lazy? Because we don't have to, quote unquote, be uncomfortable, but you do have to if you want to accomplish anything. If you want to accomplish your mission, if you want to even have a mission and believe that you can accomplish something. I'd love for you to talk more about that.
So one, I think it's interesting because you brought up the fact that for 6 months they farmed potatoes, and the other 6 months they ate the potatoes, right? Talk about
All they had.
So I love sweets. So I can only imagine if like there is a hell, which I believe there is. I'm not gonna go there, but I would look at it this way. I'm like, I like potatoes. So if I'm sitting there like working with potatoes, the next thing I'm eating potatoes, I'm gonna be like, don't ever show me a potato the rest of my entire life, right? Like you can only have French fries and like, loaded mashed potatoes a certain amount of time.
Right.
I think I can speak to the uncomfortable because I became really, really comfortable. All right, so I'm going to be turning 45 in October, and I look at my lifespan, right? And I think what you're talking about is exactly what I almost fell into the trap of.
Mm.
So we're all guilty of that, and I think that's the conversation that should be had when we're talking to people too. And I think there's an awful lot of people in this world that put this fake bravado out there, like, oh yeah, I never was fat. I've always been like this, right? Or this situation like, oh, I've never been weak in my life. But then there's another side of this too, right? Like where men need to be strong and people need to be strong, but men especially, it's okay to be weak around another man, to be able to sit there and say, hey bro, I'm dealing with this. Okay. That brings in the uncomfortable aspect of things. For us to grow, we need to tap into the uncomfortable. But why are people like shying away from being uncomfortable? It's because we've only been taught comfort. We've only been taught coddled. I don't think I was ever spanked as a kid. I don't think I ever was, and I'm not sitting here for spanking, whatever the case may be. But I had the fear of God in me. Okay, my father was a police officer. He carried a gun. I knew that he could use it. I knew how it worked, right? And I remember my father sitting there saying to me one time, he's like, I created 5 of you. Okay. All right. And he said it's just like this to me. I created 5 of you. Okay. We clear? I can do it again. Right.
I love it. I love it.
My father had this amazing ability of not saying anything. And by not saying anything, it would make me so uncomfortable that I turned into this over talker where he said, and he would tell me, he's like, you're never going to go on the stand because he goes, you could be the most innocent person in the world and you would be found guilty of murder because you would just talk yourself into the fact that you killed the person. As evident by the fact that every podcast I do goes way too long. But there's a shying away from uncomfortable because they don't want strong people in this world.
There you go. Bingo.
The strong people in this world actually have been killed.
Yeah.
It's just facts. Had a conversation with a guy at the gym today. And I was sharing with him, my passion, some of my mission. And he said to me, you gotta be careful. You gotta know that, the people who try to do what you want to accomplish have been killed. And I said, I know. And I know that there's a responsibility we have in getting uncomfortable. And I think I've seen it I try not to badmouth anyone, but I've seen it in my circle. I'll put it to that way. I've seen it in my circle as I've aged, and try not to offend anyone. As you level up in your life, you start to eliminate other people who don't want to match that.
It just happens naturally, whether you want it to happen or not.
But you're the bad guy.
Right.
And it makes those people uncomfortable. And what do they then strive for, Karen? Comfort. You're making me uncomfortable. And I was very comfortable. I was very comfortable when you were this. I was very comfortable when you were beneath me. I was very comfortable when you didn't challenge me. And I think it's because back in the day, I remember the presidential challenge. I remember having to run through hoops and do all these things and get awarded by the certificate that sat there and said I was athletic in 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade. And now you got kids sitting there doing absolutely nothing for athletics. You have contests, you had debates, you had conversations in school that challenged the narrative. Now, if you do that, you're a racist, or you're this, or you're that, or you're the other thing. You have men in this world that for the last 20 years have been showed in commercials and TV and sitcoms that they're the dumbest pieces of shit in the world. And that the only other person in the world that knows anything is the wife.
Right.
So we've also been told as a man that you shouldn't speak. Because either you're a white supremacist or you're a racist or you're a misogynist or you're anything else in the world. So what happens is men are forced into this comfort zone, are being fat, dad bod individuals who drink on Saturdays, go golfing on Sundays, and are pieces of shit to their families.
Right.
Not to get too deep, too dark, but that's the comfort. And if you're listening to this podcast, watching this podcast, and you're sitting there nodding your head, I just want you to do a quick little check. Edit your circle. If you're sitting around there and saying, I'm the only person that's actually challenging myself or challenging, the narrative or trying to get better, you need a better circle. And that's uncomfortable. Right? But here we are in a situation where I don't want to be comfortable. And I think that's not being taught. It's not being taught because people are actually going into their shell the second we go out of the, and I'm guilty of this. I'm all over the place, but I'm trying to explain this from this standpoint. 2 years ago, I moved from Massachusetts to Florida because I refused to be in a situation that didn't align with my family's. And it's not just me, my wife made this decision along with me, if not before me, saying, hey, we're going to move. And I had to sit there and say, well, that makes me uncomfortable, but screw it. I want to be, this makes sense. We're going to do it. It made an awful lot of other people uncomfortable. But now we're comfortable. Because we know when we face a challenge, we can accomplish the said task at hand. And we have a great amount of people in the society who have never faced a challenge. Because the second a challenge comes to their door, they're looking at someone else to fix it for them.
So true. That, I believe, is the epidemic.
Can go so far on that, but I think it's a removal of understanding our true power.
That they also don't want us to understand. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, I think true power comes from one source. I think true power comes from one source only. And I think that's from the man upstairs.
I agree.
And we've lived in a society for many years that has not wanted to talk about that. And we have lived in a society that wants to put something else in place of where our power comes from. And I think the most powerful I've ever been, and I continue to become more powerful, is because my faith becomes stronger. And because my faith becomes stronger, I can walk into a situation, right? You know, the verse, as I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. Doesn't mean evil's not going to come to me.
Right.
But as I walk, see, there's an action being taken there. People don't want to walk. They hear that verse. And I don't know if your listeners are okay with this, but I am. You can decide if you want to hear this. If you look at the verse, as I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, it doesn't mean that you're sitting there on the outside, comfortable, going, I ain't going there. That scares me. You are taking the steps and saying, I am going to continue to walk through this valley. Why? Because I will fear no evil. So there's a few things being brought up here. As a human being, right, and as a soldier of God, we are being led to walk. We are being told to walk. That means that we must get out of the uncomfortable, we must get out of our comfort zone to walk through that, but we should fear no evil. That doesn't mean that evil won't come and attack us or intercede with us, or that doesn't mean that it won't be prevalent and present in our life. But we must not fear it. Why? Because we have the greatest comfort in the entire universe. And it resides here. So I think the reason why we live in a culture that is null and void of this drive, right? And they're shying away from becoming uncomfortable is because they do not have the presence of God in their hearts, and they do not understand their true power because they do not accept it into their life and understand the verses that have been spoken to them on how in order to live their lives. And they have supplanted the presence of God in their life, the presence of a God that's an idol and a government. And because they're telling them what to do, we've seen this cultural switch of people who, I can't talk to one person who's not strong, and every person, I should say, every person I talk to who's strong and motivated and and on fire and going for things in life, right? Karen, I'm pretty sure you can attest to this too. Every single person I talk to who's kicking ass in life and doing everything they possibly can, and you're sitting there looking at them and you're like, wow, man, you look great and you're fit and you're on fire and you're doing all these amazing things, and your wife looks like she smiles in pictures. Holy moly, that's amazing. How are you doing it? What's the answer you get all the time? God. And no one wants to honestly, who's down here in their comfort zone, eating their Ben and Jerry's and drinking Bud Light, wearing Carhartts and shopping at Target. Should I go any further? All those people who sit there and ask you the question like, hey, how are you doing it? God. Oof. Really? You're going to get awkward with God? That's the uncomfortable.
Amen.
No one wants to admit it though. Sorry.
Yeah. I'm so glad we're talking about this. First things first, I love the walk through the valley of the shadow of death. He's literally saying there is going to be evil, and it is everywhere. It's the valley of the shadow of death. And so you can't just sit there on your comfortable couch with your Ben and Jerry's and your Bud Light, and your shirt from Target.
Yep.
You can't just sit there and watch it. Well, you can, but you're going to be failing. And then also the other thing I just wanted to reiterate that you said is that if you are just watching on your television, on your Netflix or whatever, you're also, you're taking advice from somebody's telling you what to do because you haven't owned your power that's given to you by God. When you do that, then it's not your responsibility. Oh, doctor told me to. Oh, government told me to. Didn't work out. Well, there comes the lack of responsibility piece. Because if you don't have it in your heart, if you don't take your power, own it from God, then everything about your life is somebody else's responsibility. Because it wasn't my idea. Well, so I was just following directions from the whatever, fill in the blank, FBI, CDC, whatever, senators, governor, blah, 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 right? Church, even your minister at church. Well, he told me, well, it didn't work out, but it's not my fault. So there's that missing link. So if you don't have your power, if you don't accept the power from God, your God-given power that he wants us to use for his works, which is what I believe, then you don't have the responsibility. Phew, skated that one, right? Responsibility sucks. It's hard. Yeah. So I'd love for you to talk about if somebody's struggling with this. I really want to build my faith. I want to believe that I have power from God. How do you do that?
As I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Who is the valley and what's dead? We are walking in a world right now where there's a lot of dead people. So, great pastor by the name of Stephen Furtick, who runs Elevation Church. Everyone should check him out. And hopefully on this, put a link to him. Yeah. Amazing man is on fire. But he dove into this verse, right? And I've been trying to dive into it a little bit further because I think there's a calling by God that I have that not everyone else has. And I say this because everyone has their unique calling.
Absolutely.
But as we walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. The valley of death, I believe, is what we're currently in. Right? So as I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, so we have to take our steps, boom, 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 we're walking, right? Valley of death. What's the valley of death? It's very easy for us to sit there. And I used to look at this verse and picture something like, you ever watch the movie, what is it? Sleepy Hollow? Old Johnny Depp movie, right? It was really well done, and like there was all these smoky woods scenes, and like you just think of like the headless horseman, and you're going through there. It's like that's what I think of as the valley. Think of that creepy, like spooky kind of thing. And then I thought to myself, I'm like, oh, you wouldn't catch me dead walking through there, right? I'm not like, I'm scared of the dark. I'm like, I ain't doing that. So that's the picture I had when I heard this verse, right? And then you hear it at football, right before football games and stuff like that, like, and they're all like pumping chest. I think it's deeper than that, right? Because I think along that line is like, we are in a society where everyone's dead. They lack life. They lack life, and they lack that everlasting life, right? And you ask the question, like the lack of responsibility. As you're consistently walking through a situation in life where everyone around you is an energy suck. Okay. I hate Teslas, so sorry for anyone who has a Tesla. But as you drive your Tesla, at some point you need to plug it in. Okay, you need to plug it into an energy source in order to get filled up again, so that way you can drive your electric car that blows up in a few days. Sorry, but as you need to recharge, right? It's all around us. Everything around us is an energy source, and everyone around us is trying to fill that energy in that hole in their heart with a battery that's not compatible. You ask the question of like, the lack of responsibility, and how does someone become closer with their faith and understand faith? A couple of things I'll bring up here. So I wrote down Adams, right? Because we know the story of Adam and Eve. But what did Adam say, right? Eve's the one that bit the apple, right? And Adam's the one who sat there and said, well, it's not my fault, right? How many men do this too? It's not my fault. My wife told me I can't go, right? And my wife told me, I'm sorry, guys, I can't go, Okay. It's like you're another form of Adam, right? It's not my fault. Eve gave me the apple. We hear this in this culture nowadays, right? It's not my fault. The government told me I had to do this. It's not my fault. This, that, and the other thing. It's not my fault, teacher. Like, what, we can trickle this all the way down. It's not my fault. 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 At some point, we have to take responsibility for the life that we want. Not the past life, not the future life. What do you want right now? And we're all hollow. We're all empty. And if you look at what the money in the world is spent, it's really prevalent that and it's really obvious that evil exists and God exists. And I'll ask the question to someone who's a non-believer. And I'll ask them, do you believe in God? No. Okay. Have you ever gone through a situation in your life that's been really horrible, and or you're in a near-death experience or any of these occurrences, and you sat there and said, my God, will you save me? Have you ever said something like that? And if they're being truthful with me, right, here's that whole truthful aspect of things. If they're truthful with me, they'll sit there and say, yeah, at some point I sat there and said, oh my God, I need some help, right? I'm like, well, who are you asking for? Like, who are you reaching out to? And they'll say, well, I don't know. Because they're defensive, right? Going back to the uncomfortable topic. So then I'll break their defenses a little bit and I'll ask them a question like, do you believe there's evil in this world? And it's uncomfortable at first, but I'll sit there and say, let me give you some evidence of this. Have you heard of Hitler before? Yes. Do you think he was evil? Yes. Okay. Do you think there are other people like him that had this tendency to do evil? Yes. Where do you think that comes from? And like, do you think that there might be something manipulating them? Because our bodies we're all made the same. So if there is an evil presence at play that causes all the bad people in this world to do bad things, then there must be some, I mean, they must be taking their battery and plugging into the wrong source, if you ask me, right? Like that they must be plugging into like maybe the leaded fuel instead of the unleaded, so maybe they're not getting the good stuff.
Yeah. They'll blow up your engine.
So I'll say to them, is it easy for you to admit that there's a Satan and an evil one? I mean, Hollywood and the music industry and all these people are depicting that there is that. Like, is it safe to say that you can say that there's Satan? And then I'll get a yes. Usually I'll get a yes. I'm like, okay. Do you believe in yin and yang? Do you believe in positive and negative? Do you believe in opposites attract? And I'm long-winded with this, but the reason why is because you got to break this down. So simple. So if there's a bad, there must be a good. And if there's a bad and we see evil in this world, do you ever see anything that's good? And the answer is always yes. And he said, and why won't we allow there to be something that created that? And then I'll explain this to people. There's an alpha and an omega. I'm the beginning, I'm the end. And in order to become closer to the one that made us, he gave us a book. And it's all in the book. And this is gonna maybe upset a lot of people who are, biblical and they read their Bible. But we've gone through a time in the last 4 years where people have limited the knowledge that we can actually have at our disposal, right? We've been censored and we have been stripped of the knowledge that we could actually do, right? And do and have to make an informed decision.
100%.
But what if I told you that the Bible was the first thing that they censored? And the Bible, which was God's word breathed into man, was the first thing that other people who were evil decided to edit and censor, and they've been doing it since the very beginning. Would that make you want to understand what they have taken out of that text? And if you
Yes.
understood what has been taken out of that text, would it make you question really how loving and kind and generous the one who created everything could possibly be? Because we see how evil the evil one is. They don't hide that. But yet they want to censor what love and kindness and generosity, the one that created us, has. And if you understand that, like the Bible, when it's translated, they strip out words and they sit there and say, well, we're making it easier for you to read. Well, they're actually making it easier for us to understand COVID too. And how did that work out? They've made it easier by censoring the people that could speak up against things that actually were common sense. And we've been called domestic terrorists and all this other crap. So I think there is text to be read that is going to speak to anyone who is seeking God in their life, that will be drawn to them. And the other thing is, talk to someone who walks the walk and talks the talk. If you're in a situation where there are, if you're going to a church and you're bored, find a different church. There are people who are on fire for God and you can hear it. You can hear it, you can feel it. There's far too many people in this world that are single, alone. And they strive for fulfillment in the things of this world that are controlled by evil. If human trafficking is the number one thing in this world as far as a moneymaker, and the next thing is drugs, well, the other thing is pornography.
Mm-hmm.
So you're telling me it's very prevalent to me and very obvious to me that evil exists in this world. If you sit there and have people who are taking drugs because one, they can't cope with life because there's a hole somewhere, and the other thing is they're trying to find instant gratification in a sexual act. And both those things, for me, are directly correlated to a lack of knowing one's true power and purpose in life, and understanding that that's filled through the love that can be found through understanding what we're called to do.
Yeah.
And it goes from being comfortable to being uncomfortable. And walking in those steps of understanding that there's so many people in this world who've done it. I've gone through that step of realizing that there's something bigger than me. Hopefully that answers it without people wanting to turn off this podcast because it's depressing, but it's not.
I don't think so. I think you gave, there's so many resources for us to do all of the things that you're talking about, to learn the word of God, to find a community, you just listed all there's the 4 steps, right? Read the word of God, find a community, walk through your challenges without seeking an outside source or an outside substance that will help you forget about it. You got to walk through it. And realize that there is evil, and put on the armor of God. It's right there in the Bible. I love that. And I also, as you know, I work with women who are also seeing this in the dating pool and in the available men. I just read yesterday or 2 days ago that the amount of single people in their 40s has hit an all-time high ever in the history of this country. And my clients are typically in their 40s and have already been divorced. And now they really like to attract true love. They'd love to have a real man, a godly man that doesn't shirk away from their responsibilities, who believes in marriage and good and evil. And they get very disheartened very easily because the availability is easier with the internet and the dating apps. You're exposed to a lot more choices than you would be without those, whenever they started, I think 15-ish years ago with eHarmonies and crap.
18 years. And the reason why I'm throwing in the 18 years is I met my wife online. So I at least know it was 18 years ago.
Right. I'm so glad you said that, because I'm not bagging the mode of communication in which you can meet somebody, because it's way easier. And you really need to believe that. I talk about changing your beliefs. So just because you meet 10 douchebags online who you consider to be, just trash, that doesn't mean the medium of communication is trash. It's just a medium of communication. It's like if you met your husband in a bar, you had 2 kids, it all went to crap, you got a divorce later. It doesn't mean you never go to a bar ever again. You just happen to meet them there, right? So I would really like to get your perspective as a man, as a godly man who faces his responsibility, who has an awesome wife, incredible marriage. I know you don't like to talk about marriage without her, and I want to do a whole nother podcast with her and talk about marriage. But for my single ladies that are really wanting to attract a real man, and real love that lasts forever, what advice would you give them? How do you, maybe it's a 2-part, maybe. How do you help them identify a godly man? In my dating experience as a single mom years ago, I attracted a lot of very excellent presenters. The way they presented themselves was fantastic, right? Sending in their best representative. And until I learned to develop my own self-worth and my own self-strength. That's how you attract a great, incredible man. But I want to hear I want to hear your perspective as a single woman looking for a real man, really would like to attract one. How do you determine, by looking at their actions and their words, and what do they need to do? What would your advice be?
Wow. I am definitely not qualified to answer this question. However, As you can tell, I had to adjust my chair because I'm like, that is a loaded
I
question.
know.
I want to filter it through the, I wrote down notes too. So I'm sitting there like writing this. I'm like, okay, stick to
Where do you
the
even start? I know.
point. And what's the question? What's she asking here? So one, if I may, we must not make assumptions.
Mhm.
Okay. So a couple of things that you said, awesome wife, amazing marriage. Both points, very factual. I have an amazing wife. I would love to say I have an awesome marriage too. Both of those are true. We touched on it earlier in our conversation. There is a level of comfort and there's a level of uncomfortable. And I think what we've seen as marriage in this society now has changed and it's evolved. And whether that be because I grew up with the shows, the reality TV shows, where you had whether it be the reality TV shows or you had the what was it, Real World and all this other stuff. Everything is in your face and it's publicized, and you're seeing people's Kodak moments, and you think you know everything about everyone. And I was asked recently, actually, it was yesterday. My wife was sitting there saying, "So, like, would you go back and?" Because we were talking about some of our single friends, and she's like, "Would you go back and do online dating?" I said, "Hell no, I wouldn't." But I met my wife that way. Okay, so 18 years later, my opinion changes. I wouldn't do online dating. Maybe I would. What I'm seeing now in our culture, and this is speaking to both male and female, is you really need to spend time with the person. And spend time with the person to get to know them without there being intimacy involved.
Mhm.
The intimacy aspect of things can wait. Getting to know an individual and being able to weed through, you actually put the word their best representative. So I think a lot of men, if I can speak on that aspect of things, I think a lot of men like to put their best foot forward, and over time that wears off and you start to see what's really true about the individual. For me personally, there are roles in a relationship, and those roles ebb and flow and they change. And I think being able to have great communication with whatever spouse and partner you decide to choose is of the utmost importance. We see the facade, we see the macho man, or we see this guy who, like, oh bro, I'm like all tough and blah blah blah. Okay. Well, does he have the soft side of him that's going to be the lover and the nurturer that you need when you need them? Is that softy, right? Is he also going to be strong and be able to defend you when needed? I saw a picture of I can't remember the singer's name. Oh my God. Oh, Harry Styles. Okay. There's a picture of Harry Styles. And he's on the cover of a magazine. And he's dressed the way in which he's dressed. And all these women love him. Right? All these women are swooning over Harry Styles. And I would ask these women who are looking for a man, what are you looking for? Are you looking for the Harry Styles? Or are you looking for a man? Because I'm pretty sure if the house was burning down, you'd be carrying his ass out. He wouldn't be carrying your ass out. So for the women out there who are trying to attract a strong man, put your lists of necessities out there,
Mhm.
and then sit there and say, am I also matching what a godly man wants in a godly wife? Because most of us are. And spoken from a man who's been married for 15 years, in a couple of weeks, it's going to be 15 years. We change in our marriage. We change in life. We are not the same person that we started dating and we proposed to and got married to and anything like that. And I think as you evolve in any relationship, you have to have these check-ins to sit there and say, here's who I am and here's what I'm about. And then have that open conversation and sit there and say, are you open with this change I'm looking to make? And therefore, are you looking to make any change moving forward? And how can I support you in that? See the way in which I'm speaking on this?
I love it.
This isn't an arrogant asshole sitting there saying to you, hey, this is what I'm going to do moving forward. And that's that. And there's been times in my relationship I've done that, actually, right? From a narcissistic standpoint, been like, hey, I'm going to go and do this. Hope you're cool. It doesn't work, right? Now, my wife and I talking about comfortable and uncomfortable. We have very uncomfortable conversations. But those uncomfortable conversations lead to such amazing comfort because we're able to sit there and say, like, hey, how can we become better with our saving strategies and attain these amazing goals that you have or I have? How can we do that? Well, all right, she's coming to a person who's a wealth advisor, right? And sitting there saying, like, hey, we gotta, like, can we talk about this? And I could be that partner who's like, well, that's my job. I'm the egotistical prick who's sitting there saying that's what I do for a living twice on Sunday. But instead, I put that aside reluctantly, right? If we're being truthful, like sometimes I'm like, but then I strip it open and say, oh, man, this will be a much better relationship if I actually listen. And if I'm open. And if I give this partner of mine, right? This partner of mine that my role, my responsibility, my duty, right? Not why. My role, my responsibility and duty is that I chose every single day to wake up and still be in this house and still be in this relationship and still be in this partnership because she's freaking awesome. And that's a relationship where you're sitting there and you're meeting your person and you're sitting there saying, like, hey, even though you challenge me, this challenge is going to make me stronger. And I think this society, we dove into this earlier, is a weak ass society where no one wants a challenge. And everything's disposable. Everything's disposable. Everything's instantaneous, and no one's in it for the long haul.
So true.
I say to people, I've been with my wife for 18 years. They're like, wow. And I'm like, no, we're just getting started. Like, we're just still figuring things out as far as like, okay, we've been through ups, downs, lefts, and rights. But I'm here, she's here, and we have conversations to sit there and say, wow, the road ahead's going to be amazing, but the present is pretty damn good too. So
Yeah.
to you, how do I attract a godly man? Do they talk about God? First thing, do they talk about God? You can't sit there and go into a bar and expect, no, maybe you can, but are godly men walking into a bar and drinking 6-packs and hanging out at Hooters? Probably not. Are they sitting, like, where are you meeting this person? And I've said this to single guys too. It's like, you can't be sitting there casting your net and wondering why you're not getting anything like decent if you're sitting there and hanging out where they're not there. If you're continuously going to beat your head against the wall and say, I can't find anyone, but yet you're looking at a blank wall, right? And you're not moving. Well, shit, you're not going to find anything. Are you having a conversation with people and saying, I'm looking for a godly man? Do you know one? Do you happen to know one? The other thing is, are you in environments and in groups where godly men are? And are you also breaking down, this is for men and women, this isn't just women, But as a man and as a woman, right? I'm going to speak from the male side of things. Are you showing your ego the door? I think that's one of the most attractive traits you can have as a human being is telling your ego to shut up. Because I think that's been one of the biggest things I've had to learn.
You heard the acronym for ego? Edging God out.
I love
Pretty
that.
good, eh?
I love that.
Isn't that
I love
awesome? Me too. I love that. I love everything you're saying, I believe, falls into a few categories. I just want you to get your thoughts on this. Is their actions. It could be an amazing godly man who went out for a beer with his buddy, right? It's not like we don't ever drink. And there's a difference between going and having 17 shots every single night, and that's his habit. So paying attention to the man's habits, right? And that will determine his core values. With my clients, I talk about core values all the time. What are they? What's important to you? And then cultivating your own. If your most important thing to you is integrity, well, then you have to have integrity. You're not going to attract anybody that has integrity, right? And I love what you just said. It's not necessarily the every once in a while types of, occasions or places or whatever. It's the consistency. And so you're going to have to put yourself into situations with that person without intimacy getting in the way. And so that you can evaluate clearly both of yourselves. Where's your ego? I say that to women all the time. We have egos. What are we falling in love with? And what are we doing about ourselves? You can't just be looking at the man the whole time. What does he have for me? What is he going to do for me? No. What are you going to do for them? What value do you provide? Do you have the same core values? And I wanted to ask your opinion about core values specifically. I know we change. I just love the topic about the short term and the long term. Looking at everything as a long term. Yeah, your situations change, your challenges will change. You are hopefully growing together by having that uncomfortable. There we go again. How do you grow? Get uncomfortable. How do you see somebody's values? Get them in uncomfortable situations. That means you have to put yourself in uncomfortable situations. Your discussions, they're uncomfortable. It's the only way to get closer. It's the only way to grow. It's the only way to stay married 18 years. It's impossible. If you don't have those uncomfortable conversations, you probably won't stay married 18 years, in my opinion.
I agree to a point, but keep going. Is there more that you want to say?
Yeah, let's hear it.
Well, I think, man, hopefully they don't. Who gives a shit? I piss people up all the time.
Right. Cheers.
I think what you said, I like it. I like it. I want to love it, but I like it, and I'll explain why. You said actions, habits, core values, right? I'm crying out loud, okay? It's a relationship. It's a relationship, and I think a lot of these people, and I'm sure you tell me, a lot of these women, business owners and entrepreneurs.
Oh, yes, I tend to attract those.
Okay, so that's all right. But we need to understand there's love involved here, and this isn't this isn't a merger and acquisition.
Nope, it's not a contract. It's not a chemistry experiment.
It is in a way, right? There's an amazing couple that my wife and I have gotten to know and know and actually really respect them. I can probably say they're a cute couple that own a jewelry shop down near where we are, right? And they were together for 40 plus years before they got married. And she said to me, she's like, it was amazing during that time because I knew every time he came home, it was a choice.
Mm.
And it hit me right here because I was like, that's an amazing thing to hear. It's an amazing thing to hear that for 40 plus years, right? And they've been married for like, I think 20, 30 years after that. They've been 20 years after. They've been together for a long time, right?
So
Um, and she's like, but for 40 years, I knew every time he came home, it was because he wanted to come home.
he chose it every day.
Right. So and I think this culture we're in too, where everything is freaking online. Everything's online and everything is a flex, or everything is like a branding, right? A branding of ourselves. It's like, what are you keeping inside? What are you keeping personal to yourself? Right. Like you said something along the lines of like, does your partner have the same core values? No. I want to go destroy the Federal Reserve and completely and totally destroy the whole financial system, right? And I'm this guy he's like, oh, babe, I got to go run through walls and everyone needs to know the currency is bullshit. This, that, and the other, like, right? I'm like, that's my mission, mine, right? I am driven to like do this stuff, right? I come home and I'm sitting there like, babe, I had like 10 conversations with people about money, blah, 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 right? And she's like, right? And someone could look at that and be like, wow, they don't have the same core values. No, we do. We do. Right. But I think so many people are like, wow, they need to be an entrepreneur too. No, they don't. They need to have core values. No, they don't. They need to have this. No, they don't. They need to be right for you. Period. End of story. My wife has her own core values. And her core values, if you want to use that freaking word, because it's so overplayed. Going back to our grandparents, they didn't have core values. They lived together forever. Lived and loved and respected each other for 60 plus years. And they had a big, huge freaking party on their 60th anniversary. You looked at the two of them and they still kissed each other. They slept in separate beds, but they still slept. But you know what I mean? Like you see the old people and you look at them and you're like, how the hell did they do it? There was no pornography. There was no internet. There was no instant gratification, and there was no comparing yourself to the other people on with their Snapchat and their FaceTime and their MySpace and all this other bullshit, sitting there telling you that your life and your relationship with your spouse does not equal theirs. I try not to get angry on the call, but you got me revved up. A partner in a relationship is someone that you can look at and accept for who they are and try not to freaking change them. Everyone's trying to change people nowadays. You'll have guys who are coaches and sponsors and sitting there flexing on that. They're like, bro, you're a fat piece of shit. You should probably get in shape. No, maybe that person's already lost 100 pounds and you didn't see the transformation up until that point.
Right.
Are you asking the questions? Are you a single woman going up to another man and sitting there saying, tell me your journey? What made you get to this point? And maybe you fall in love with the journey and you're sitting there looking at a doughboy, but you realize that doughboy is someone who's actually lost 200 pounds and understood this thing and has all these other things that he's working on, and he's trying his freaking hardest, and guarantee you in 10 years, you're going to be sitting there saying, I'm so glad I stuck with this man who has a purpose, has a mission, has fought through adversity, and knows where the hell he's going. But you won't do that until you actually put the intimacy aside for a second, have true heartfelt conversations, and then you establish as a union your core values. That's how 18 years, I think, is happening. And maybe I think she'd agree with me. We've established in a relationship what is non-negotiable. Okay. And you bring in a child into the mix, and that solidifies the things that you have a responsibility to do. These people who are struggling in relationships and going to counseling before they even married, oh my goodness gracious, it just doesn't work. Move on. It's not the right person. It's not that hard. If you find and align with someone who has, to your point, great core values and great like that on their own, it's going to jive. And if you put God center, guess what? He's going to make it happen. But we're trying to take a square peg, round hole, and sit there and say, well, they're hot. It makes sense. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. there is going to be challenges, but you should have the challenges when you're actually going through shit. Like when you've actually gone in a relationship for a period of time and you've dealt with the loss of a mother, right? You should be able to sit there. I should be able to sit there and say to my spouse, can you help me? And they want to be there because you've gone through stuff. When you move from Massachusetts to Florida and you basically said goodbye to everything you've ever known for a combined 80 years of your existence, you're not sitting there saying, well, I hope our core values are aligned. No, you've sat there and you've said her principles and her ability to have reasoning and common sense is there. Karen, this is an overblown answer to you, but guys, I'm talking to the guys for a second, and maybe I'm talking to the women. If you bring nothing intellectually to the conversation, maybe read a book. This doesn't always last. There needs to be this beauty inside that you're attracted to and you can converse with. I've said it to people for a long time, and I mean it. My wife is the most beautiful person in the world, but I'm the only one who gets to see her beauty fully, both physically, emotionally, spiritually. That beauty is unbelievable. And I think, you want to talk about a godly man? Godly man understands those character traits and can dive deeper than surface level and sit there and say, what does this person bring? How is this person going to nurture my child if I have children with them? How is she nurturing her children that she already has if she's coming into this relationship? How is this man going to nurture my how is he going to provide? Do we need to have these core values? No. But we need to have the principles, and they're all laid out for us already. Our grandparents had it. Joe, come home every Friday, be with your family. Okay. Work your tail off. Okay. Provide for us. Okay. And I will bear you children. I will take care of you. I will love you and I will be kind to you. Now it's like, oh, well, is he going to buy me a Coach purse, or is he going to do this, that, and the other thing?
You're going to have a life full of suffering if that's the only thing that's important to you. It's fucking Coach purses.
It's an empty existence. It's an empty existence, sure, but people who are buddy of mine's going through a breakup, and he's now separated from her, and I should say I barely know this kid, but he's reached out to me and he said, what should I do? And I take that as a compliment. Again, everyone likes to perceive that we are the knowledge bearers, but I'm going to continue to point to God and say he's the ultimate knowledge bearer. But I said to him, I'm like, get really close to God and then take 2 seasons. He said, what do you mean by 2 seasons? I'm like, you don't really know yourself yet until you spent some time with yourself. And I think so many people are looking to jump into being, again, this whole comfortable thing, because they don't want to admit the fact that they're not yet complete.
Right.
And in a marriage, it's a constant ability to realize that you are unique and you have unique goals and you have things that you want to accomplish individually. And you should be able to reach out to your partner and say, as I'm in this relationship with you, I also want to achieve this. And if you have a partner who's comfortable in their own self, they're going to be able to sit there and say to you, I am supporting you all the way. And I can speak firsthand and say that's growth in the hugest way. Is that my wife has supported me in everything I've decided to do from a business standpoint, and it's been amazing. And when she turns around and she says, hey, I would like to actually create something for myself. Let's do it. And then ask permission. Do you ask permission to your partner that you're vetting right now? If I choose to do something moving forward, are you going to be there with me or not? That's powerful stuff.
So good.
You got to have someone who supports you.
Yeah. Amen, brother. Thank you so much for that perspective. Well, we are running out of time. I'm sorry. I wish we could go another 4 hours, of course. There's so many things we want to talk about. We'll just do another one, hopefully soon. If you're willing and able, I'd love to have you back.
Sure.
How can people find you?
Oh, I make it very, very difficult. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Instagram as John Wagner _LFG, stands for Limitless Financial Group, and also stands for the other thing that you can do LFG with. You can find me there. Yeah, there you go. That's the best way. That's the best way. As far as website and everything else like that, that is in the works, to be honest with you. But I'm excited to be able to launch that probably within the next couple of weeks.
Awesome. Well, this podcast will be out in the next couple of weeks, so I'll link it to the show notes, and as well as Elevation Church. And John, thank you so much. Thanks for taking the time, and thanks for sharing your wisdom. And I really enjoyed this. I really appreciate you. And listeners, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you. God bless you. And just remember that you can create the life you want. Just take it one day at a time, and call John.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Karen.
Thank you.